We're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome you all here for our Georgia Cotton Commission mid-year meeting. I think this is our 4th year doing this. Appreciate you all coming out today. We're going to have some really good speakers, so hopefully it'll be educational. Start off with, I'm Bart Davis from Colquitt County. I'm chairman of the Georgia Cotton Commission. I'd like to recognize my board members that's present today. We have Matt Coley from Dooley County, John Ruart from Morgan County, Greg Seitz, Bullitt County, Chris Hopkins from Toombs County. I'd also like to introduce some of our industry leaders that's here today. We have David Rupenegger, Southern Cotton Growers, Dusty Finley, Southeastern Cotton Ginners. I don't know if Dusty's in here or not. Andy Nolan, Southeastern Cotton Ginners. Ben Evans, Chairman, Southeastern Ginners Association. Ben, stand up. Everybody needs to know you. No, I'm joking. Gary Evans, Southeastern Cotton Ginners. We also have Sam Durant, Chairman of the South Carolina Cotton Board, with us today, travel down. Michael Cool, South Carolina Cotton Board. Bill Sylvester, Cotton Incorporated. Daniel Radford, the Cotton Board. I also like to recognize the ones that's in here, all our extension, Camp Hand and his whole cotton team. All the research we do that we fund couldn't be done without them, and they do a really good job for us. Hope I ain't left anybody out that slipped in. Thank y'all for coming. Hope it's be a good day, education for y'all. I'm turn it over to Taylor, our executive. Also, I'd like to recognize Taylor Sills, our executive director. I'm sure all y'all know him. I don't know if it's Kelly and Audrey in here. They really good staff we have. We couldn't do what we do at the commission without them. I really appreciate what they do. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everybody. I'm gonna try to do this. I like to move around sometimes. First of all, I do want to thank our sponsors. We've got a great group of sponsors that's helped us put this meeting on for the last 4 years, as Bart said, and we've got some new ones. But we're excited to come to Statesboro again and do this meeting. We've got probably the largest pre-registration that we've ever had, and I think 90% of those people are out in the hall and will probably stay in the hall for the foreseeable future, and that's okay. That's the whole point of the sponsorship. We'll start this presentation out the way we do with a breakdown of our budget, the way we try to do at all our meetings. I want to point out, and we'll talk about this in a second, but this research is probably the biggest dollar figure that we've had, and that's to address the concerns that you all have touched on over the last year or two. Like I said, it's just shy of $800,000 for this crop, and another healthy amount for 2027. A list of the projects for 26 is on the board. We were in Midville yesterday kind of going over some of these projects, and this is the cornerstone of what we do at the commission, and very important to us and to the whole industry, in my opinion. A few things, and some of this is going to be touched on later, but we don't have anybody from the Cotton Council here, so I want to touch on some of these things. Big Beautiful Bill passed last year. There's a few things going on right now that I think you all need to know about. Most of you, if you're eligible, should have gotten a postcard from FSA about this base acre issuance. If you were eligible, there's a formula at which you're adding the base acres to your farm, strengthening that safety net. I got a call from USDA asking us to talk about this because Georgia leads the nation in opt-outs in the new base allocation. And I don't, for the life of me, understand why. Because there's no taking away of base in this equation. That's something that I think a lot of people are concerned about. There's no taking away any base. There's only adding base. And if I've heard in some parts of the country people want to add more cotton or peanut base. Well, it's done on a formula. There's nothing really you can do about it. If you think that you're going to be able to add more from your unassigned later down the road, I wouldn't count on that. I'd go ahead and take this opportunity while you can to strengthen, again, really strengthening that safety net up under you. Typically, we would have made an ARC PLC decision on July 15th. That's been the normal plan for years. Well, we're not doing the election until after this 8/31 deadline on the new base, which presents a different equation. You know, if it's October 15th or November 1st or whatever, you're going to have a good idea of what the yields are in your community. And so there's a chance that you may want to take ARC. Now, what that looks like for you and your operation and your community, I obviously don't know today, but it's something you need to think about when you go into that delayed election. Again, we wanted to make sure everybody had that on their mind. Top industry priorities from a policy perspective for this year are additional economic assistance for producers. This was a priority for the administration, as many of you saw. That priority has passed the House, but it has yet been taken up in the Senate. And to date, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, is $11 billion for row crop and specialty crop producers, but very little information beyond that. We've talked a lot over the last year about the Buying American Cotton Act. We are up to 93 co-sponsors of that. That's great bipartisan legislation. And just we'll go over who the Georgia co-sponsors are. We have our Senators Ossoff and Warnock, and then Congressman Allen, Congressman Bishop, Congressman Austin Scott, Congressman Carter, Congressman Collins, Congressman Jack, Congressman Fuller, and Congresswoman McBath. And David Scott, who unfortunately passed away, but his name is still on the list as they had a special election last night to fill a seat, but it's going to a runoff in that Atlanta district. This is wonderful. I want to tell you about one of these co-sponsors in particular, and this is not an endorsement by any means. Clay Fuller. Clay Fuller is a freshman member, got elected in a special election back in January, I believe, from Northwest Georgia. There's a small pocket of cotton in this district. There's a young farmer from that part of the world who contacted us. He said he was going to Washington, wanted some information, so I got him in touch with the people at the Cotton Council. Congressman Fuller had been in office 3 days. The first piece of legislation he co-sponsored was the Buying American Cotton Act. And what's neat about it, at the time, there was a waiting list to be added as a co-sponsor, because they're trying to make it as bipartisan as possible. And the original author of the legislation said, if you go find a Democratic member to co-sponsor as well, you can bypass everybody on the list. And so he went and found Congresswoman McBath from the Atlanta area, and they came on together. And that's just, I think this is a wonderful thing for our industry. It not only does it support producers, but it supports the downstream segments of the industry as well. And the industry had a goal of 100 co-sponsors, and we're right there at it. So I think that's great. Many of you saw the information of the Great American Cotton Plan that came out in May. Some of it might be a little confusing to you. A lot of it is highlighting things that have already been done that have not been fully realized by producers yet. So we'll just go over a little bit of it. Some of the things that I think are the most important is the amplification of the National Cotton Council's Plant Not Plastic program, making Plant Not Plastic government speech, so that our friends at the Cotton Board and Cotton Incorporated can jump on that. They've endorsed the Buying American Cotton Act from the Secretary's office. We're supporting Cotton Council International's efforts, as well as one thing, particularly for Georgia producers in the commission, is that in her presentation, she was on a farm in central Arizona. It's a long way from here. One of the main things she talked about was cotton jassid. Cotton jassid has not made it to Arizona. Hopefully it doesn't. But the cotton jassid is a priority for her because it is a priority for you all. And that message has been delivered to her time and time again, not only from ourselves and National Cotton Council, but her APHIS staff and ARS staff as well. Now, the big things that I think are important in here is really it gives cotton a platform that we've never seen from a USDA angle before. That's what I think is so great about this. They did a lot of advertising for us. So they collaborated with the industry on that. Supporting the Plant Not Plastic and the Cotton Research and Promotion Program is a big deal, in my opinion. The enhanced support for CCI is a big deal. Just this week here in Bullitt County, we had a group of 25 mill executives from Bangladesh, and I thought the visit went really well. We've now been able to host those groups 4 out of the last 5 years. Bangladesh not only have a tremendous textile infrastructure, but it's an area for growth for the U.S. that I think is important. There was one gentleman, he was pretty adamant that he was the largest buyer of American cotton in Bangladesh. I did the math because they talk about tons. He bought 500,000 bales last year. That's a big customer. I think everyone will agree. A few final notes on the Big Beautiful Bill implementation. We do have the reference price increase for 2025. The current projections on that at 1,000 pounds an acre is $156. I think if you look at what it would have been before, it probably would have been in the $50 or $60 range. That's a big deal. The payment limits are adjusted for inflation. So for the 2025 crop, the limit is now going to be statutory at 155. For 2025, it's 160. For 2026 crop, it's expected to be 164. We've got our PLC and SCO combination. We've talked a lot about this. The newest thing that's been put in place is these changes to the marketing loan. And again, some of our Georgia people were very instrumental in getting this done. We're going to use 3 versus 5 Far East quotes. That's retroactive to July 4th. This low 30 program, so it gives you, we called it a 30-day look back at first. The USDA doesn't like that, and it's probably not the best way to think about it anyway. It's more of a look forward, but they're calling it low 30, so that if the pop were to go lower, the LDP were to go lower in that 30-day window after you were to redeem or pop, that's retroactive to July 4th too. That rule is out, but we have not, at some point, we think by the end of the year, you're going to be able to get some additional funds from that. And as you all know, that any funds right now are a big deal. We've got the loan rate in place for 2026, and we're ongoing with that issuance of 30 million new acres of base. And again, the deadline on that is August 31st. We also this year, yep.
Is there any indication that everybody can get
The full amount?
more than 30 million acres?
I don't know yet. I think there's some figuring still to be done on that. I know that when this process started, I talked to a crop insurance agent, and the Crop Insurance Professionals of America had given them a factor of just shy of 80%. But that's TBD, because if we have a bunch of people opt out, then the factor would theoretically go up. So we'll know after the fact, Ben. Sorry for not a better answer. This year, the Georgia General Assembly passed legislation that makes Georgia cotton the official fabric of the state of Georgia. For those of you that nothing's really going to change in the market or anything because of that, but it gives, again, a platform for cotton to be discussed. All of these things that we've been highlighting for the last several years with the environmental impacts and economic impacts of cotton are in that legislation. They're written into the bill, and it's now in the official code of Georgia. Again, it's wonderful. We had a great event with the governor there, and something I think that we can use that to push state purchasing of cotton going forward, which I think institutional purchasing will help build demand more than anything as we move forward. A few promotional things, I like to clip off things I see in social media as we have these meetings. So I've got 3 things that I've seen on social media and email. This is one, I just thought this was funny. It says, every girl in the gym notices the guy in the cotton shorts. No one's looking at the man in Lululemon. I thought that was pretty good ad. This is a golf brand. When we've talked about them before, Breed Dratty, and they do a lot of synthetic stuff too, but they're really doubling down on cotton this summer. It's the summer of cotton. They've done cotton pop-up shops at some of the major tournaments. And this gentleman, I believe, during the PGA Championship, he wore a cotton blend shirt, and I think theirs are 93%. He wore a cotton blend every day during the tournament, and they advertised that. That's great. On the right, when I got this email, this is a newer brand called Olido. It's a golf brand. I think I'm sort of targeted in their main demographic. When I first saw this, I thought this was an email from the council. The way that the colors are and everything, this is new. They only are doing high cotton-rich blend products. I think that, again, I think there's been a shift. Now, are we out of the hole yet? No. We're still using about an even amount of synthetic overall as we are cotton. We talked a lot about the Arnie McNair thing during county meetings this year. I've now connected with Arnie. He's an interesting fellow, to say the least, but he's now done 2 runs of his products that have been out. And that, again, that's great. And a lot of it is just the conversation that is being had. A year and a half ago, you never would have seen that type of online chatter about cotton and cotton products. A couple other little notes for you as we move forward. Last year we had some more products on the approved list, round module wrap. I want to point out that this year they've taken one off. We won't get into all the details of that. I'm not 100% sure as to why. Obviously, it was determined that they did not actually meet the standard. And so today, the only ones on the list are your yellow and pink from Tama, your blue from S&K, and your blue from Langston. And I think when I show you this chart, you'll see why some of that is the case. I had one producer tell me that they thought using the approved list products was a good insurance policy for them. Because if you have a bunch of calls on plastic, it does get pretty expensive pretty quick, I think. So just wanted to point that out to you. And then we talk about this at all our meetings. These are the remaining cotton and coffee calls that are put on by the cotton board for the rest of the year. I think this is a good use of an hour one morning, once a month. These are the topics for the rest of the year. The next one will be, I guess, Daniel, the 3rd Tuesday in August, and we'll be talking about Cotton Incorporated's upcoming plan for 2027. I think you'll all agree that's something important for us all to discuss. And then let's see if I have anything else in here. No, I don't. So I want to show you this. This was the graphic that USDA came out with when they announced the Great American Cotton Plan. Real blanks wear cotton. We decided that it'd be good for real Georgians to wear cotton, and hope you all will as well. There's my contact. We do have a lot of UGA field days coming up in the next couple weeks. One in Attapulgis tomorrow, one in Plains next Wednesday, one in Midville in 2 weeks, I believe. We've also got the Tifton Field Day the first week of September, and the field day at JPC in Watkinsville at the end of September. Our annual meeting is going to be the last Wednesday in January as tradition, and we'll hope you all plan to come. Now, while Dr. Singleton comes up, is there anything, any questions anybody has for me? We appreciate your support. There is one, last year we talked about last year things were a little different. Things aren't great still today. Last year I mentioned how we're strong because of you all, and that's still the case. Our organization is in great shape. We've got great leadership, great support from people in the countryside. On the camp's podcast, we talked about how this is a team sport. And there's a gentleman who many of you know and have met who's from this side of the state, who's on the state Supreme Court. And when he was running for office, I told him, David, he's a very inquisitive person. He said, Taylor, I need you on my team. This is a team sport. Well, this is even more of a team sport, what we're doing here. Now, you all are on the team because you came to the meeting. You come to your county meetings. When we ask you to do things, you do them. But we need you to talk to your neighbors. We need everybody on the team. We need everybody. If there's things that you're unhappy about in the industry, or things you have questions about, ask. This is a team sport, and we need everybody interacting with us and providing input if we're going to continue to improve as an organization. So one special guest walked in. Duncan Johnson's our state executive director of the FSA. Very happy to have him here today and his support. I know that he wants to learn about what's going on your farm and in your business. So if you get a chance, make sure to speak to Duncan. With that, Taylor, I'll turn it over to you.
So my name is Taylor Singleton, Extension Specialist at the University of Georgia, based out of the Tifton campus, where I focus on topics related to sustainability, so cover crops, conservation tillage, love pollinator habitats. But my main area of emphasis is pesticide stewardship, because I hope you would all agree that that is the pillar, or one of the pillars of our farm sustainability. And so, brainstorming back and forth with Taylor on a topic for today, I'm going to continue with the theme that he just ended with, that we are all in this together and this is a team sport. And so when we're talking about the sustainability of Georgia cotton production, we're going to talk a little bit for the next 25 minutes or so. Hopefully somebody will help me stay on time. about pesticide stewardship and how you can join that fight with us and join the team to help steward and protect our ability to use pesticide products into the future. So it feels like just yesterday we were in this room for using pesticides wisely. So have seen many of you over the last several months attended meetings around the state and things like that. So if you came to using pesticides wisely this year, this is a repeat slide. But the message is still ultimately the same. Pesticides are all over the news these days. This is in the New York Times, so if you think about it, we talked about this in the spring. These are some pretty big headlines that are being read by people all over the country, very urban-based audiences. And if you pair that with the numerous lawsuits that are taking place, I know everybody has seen these ads on TV, on social media. There's a lot of lawsuits that are happening around pesticides, specifically from a safety standpoint. You've all seen the glyphosate. We've had some big headlines here in Georgia for Roundup, lawsuits all over the country, and paraquat as well, talking about Parkinson's. So just lots of conversation taking place right now when it has to do with pesticides and human safety and use around the country, being led by more urban-based audiences. So we talked about that at UPW, and that's very, very concerning. But what I think as I think about, our ability to use pesticides into the future, what is really concerning, and we're talking about the general public, it's headlines such as these that pop up in really visual places that concern me the most. And so think about, the things that we see on social media. These are the types of articles that my family members send to me from social media, or I have my grandma print out and put in my birthday card that she mails every year. Things such as, we talk about pesticides in our produce. How do we wash pesticides off our produce? The dirty dozen, that's a big topic of conversation. And it's in headlines such as our local news outlets. This one I think is from Food and Wine, CNN Food. So lots of very visual, and I guess the best term would be social-based publications, social media, floating around on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Lots and lots of eyes are seeing these headlines, and you think about the folks that are making decisions for their household and the headlines that are influencing that, it becomes very, very concerning for pesticides and our ability to defend the products that we need moving into the future. And so ultimately, I think when you see those headlines and you hear the conversations that are happening around you in your community, with your neighbors, the facts become very clear. The public does not understand pesticide use. They do not understand pesticide safety. They do not understand regulation, the analysis that goes into registering pesticide products, the benefits, the costs, etc. I think as human beings, we naturally fear uncertainty. It's just ingrained to us. Maybe it's a defense mechanism. So you think about the conversations you have with your family and your neighbors. I have a family member, she teaches 3rd grade. If you were to put me in that classroom with 8 and 9-year-olds, I probably wouldn't last 5 minutes. They would eat me alive. I'm very terrified of that situation. But in the same sense, my family member does not understand pesticides. She does not understand their safety, how they're regulated, how we know they're safe. And so when she is scared to feed her baby regular baby food and chooses organic out of fear, that is a problem. And so if we think about, how do we defend and protect our pesticide use? How do we help folks understand why on the farm we need pesticides, of course, but how we use them and how we know that we are safe when using them, and how we know as a consumer they are also safe when consuming and utilizing those products. How do we share that message? And so ultimately, if we can't defend and protect pesticide use, I think we can all agree that we have a very, very long road ahead of us. And so historically, there's been several different entities involved with using pesticides, registering pesticides, and promoting pesticide use in a safe and effective way. A lot of the conversation historically, I think, has been led by regulatory agencies and industry, but times have really changed. And I think we're at a point now where the conversation around pesticides is being driven more by the public and the consumers, but we also have a role to play as farmers and pesticide applicators as well. I think us and the public are going to drive the conversation into the future. And so with that in mind, the goal for today in the next 20 minutes or so that we have left together, we'd like to do something a little bit different. And I hope that you get something from this today to keep, in your back pocket. But I'd like to talk a little bit about the pesticide regulatory process. I don't want to get too in-depth in it, but maybe just a little bit more in-depth than UPW, just so you have some information to keep in your back pocket in case you are ever approached by somebody who questions your pesticide use, and you've got some information to share with them, maybe a little bit more in depth than we've talked about before, so you can help them understand how they're safe and how those products are extremely valuable to your operation. And then we really wanted to talk more about how you as an applicator, as a grower, can get involved and stay involved in the pesticide stewardship effort. Be a part of that team fighting for pesticide sustainability. Okay, so to kick it off, the pesticide regulatory process, you all know, is very, very long. It is a long process to get a pesticide from development, discovery, to the marketplace. But we're gonna jump in at the regulatory point in this process, at the point where a registrant chemical company is gonna submit a pesticide for registration. They have a new pesticide product, it looks good in research trials. They are now submitting that packet of information to the EPA so that product can be registered and move into the marketplace. So this is really where the EPA scientists start to get into the nitty-gritty. So that pesticide is developed and a packet of information is submitted to the EPA. So this is really interesting. It is a huge packet of information. It includes information on the performance of that product, but really in the scheme of things, that's not the most important part of this when it comes to the regulatory process. EPA wants to know, and we do too, I do too as a consumer, I as a pesticide applicator want to know what is the hazard of this product to humans and the environment. So how toxic is it? How long is it going to persist in the environment? What's it going to do if it contacts something, some animal or some plant? What is the post-application exposure like? So where is a human likely to interact with this pesticide if they are not an applicator? Are they going to come into contact with their food in their day-to-day environment? And what is that contact going to do to them? And how can it be avoided? What is the user exposure? That's very important to me, and it hopefully is very important to you as well. How, as a pesticide applicator, am I likely to come into contact with this product? How can that be avoided, and what is the potential for harm there? Spray drift, that's a big topic of a conversation these days. How likely is this product to move, to drift, and what happens if it does? Environmental fate. How is this product going to interact with the environment? Is it going to stick around a long time? Does it move in the water? Does it move through the soil? And then residues. Where is this pesticide going to persist? Is it likely to continue on a food product down the chain? Is it going to move through our goods and into the supply chain? We need to know what those residues are going to do. So all of this information is submitted to the EPA when that product is submitted for registration. So this information right away addresses the question that I'm sure you get from your neighbors. As your neighbor, I see you spraying your pesticide product. How do I know I'm safe from the pesticides that you're spraying? Well, all of this information is being analyzed by EPA to answer that specific question. And so as EPA gathers this information and receives the information from the registrant, they put together what's called a risk assessment. So how likely is this product, if it moves into the marketplace, going to cause risk to humans and the environment? And they've got 3 questions in mind when they do this. Because again, we're trying to assure the public that they are safe from our pesticides that we're using on the farm. So how likely is this product to harm wildlife, fish, plants, non-target organisms, endangered species, our favorite term these days, etc. So how likely is this product going to harm wildlife? How likely is this product to be a contaminant of our surface and groundwater? That's a really important factor as well. But probably the most important factor here is how likely is this product to harm humans? Short-term and long-term toxicity is considered. So we're talking short-term. How likely is it to cause an acute effect? Is it going to cause bronchitis if we breathe it in? Is it going to burn us? Is this product, if we use it over the course of our career or interact with it over the course of a lifetime, is it going to cause cancer? Is it going to cause Parkinson's? All of that is evaluated in this risk assessment. So it's really interesting. EPA has a ton of scientists on staff. They have toxicologists focused on human health, toxicologists focused on ecology. They have biologists, any of the ologists that you would think of that would be important in evaluating the impacts of pesticide and their effects on humans and the environment. They have trained scientists that look over this data to make an assessment. And when they're doing this, they're not only looking at the data submitted from the registrant, but they're also looking in what's called the scientific literature to see what else has been done with this product. Has there been scientists done in other places, unbiased research done at other institutions that would support or contradict the risk assessment that's being compiled? And that information is included as well. So it's really a comprehensive look at how this pesticide product is going to interact with the environment and human health. But what's really interesting about this process is that when EPA is gathering all of this information and conducting their risk analysis, conducting those assessments on the data, they're looking at this through the lens of what's called a cost versus benefit. What is the benefit of using this product to you as the grower, to humankind's food supply, etc.? But ultimately, what is the cost? And there's no cost greater than that of a human life. And so that's weighed very, very heavily in this process. And so when the risk assessment gets to the factors focusing on humans, they're looking at aggregate risk through food, water, and residential exposures. Where are we going to be interacting with this pesticide product in every aspect of our life as a consumer, as an applicator? And they're also adding in the fact that we may be interacting with other pesticide products as we interact in our day-to-day lives. So all of that is added together, as well as occupational risk, and then the health term impacts that we talked about, short-term and long-term. We're looking at cancer, Parkinson's, etc. So all of this is considered as well. So it's a cost versus benefit. We've got safety factors added onto everything to account for human health. But again, there's no cost greater than that of a human life. And so that's weighed very heavily in this process. And so as we interact with folks in our environment and our day-to-day operations, your neighbors, your family, you can assure them that there is a lot of data, a lot of science that goes into understanding how pesticides are going to interact with us as consumers, with our food source, and safety is the most important factor that's considered. But we do have safety factors added on at 1,000x level to account for any harm that may occur. So we're very, very safe, and there's a lot of data from unbiased institutions, data submitted from the industry that supports that claim. So ultimately, cost versus benefit, again, what is the cost of using this product? What is the benefit to agriculture, to humankind? Does not account for tolerances in food. So again, no cost greater than that of human life. And so just like many things in the federal government, there's a lot of checks and balances in place to make sure that this is being accounted for and is being upheld with pesticide use. One of the big factors that we deal with pesticides is there's a lot of laws that interact with pesticide use and regulate how we use pesticides. And I'm going to move through these pretty quickly just to keep us on time. But looking at some of the major laws when it comes to pesticide use, we of course have FIFRA. FIFRA is the law that regulates the use, the sale, the production of pesticides. It's one of our oldest pesticide laws. But there's two laws that are very instrumental when it comes to regulating pesticide residues and tolerances when it comes to foods and human health. The FFDCA, they set the tolerance for the maximum pesticide residues allowed on food. So whatever that level of pesticide exposure on our food source that may cause us harm, we then have tolerances added to it to protect any sensitive individuals, infants and children, and just members of the general population. That comes from the FQPA. They evaluate pesticide exposure with considerations to special populations. These two laws are regulated by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. So another federal agency that is, again, just overseeing pesticide use, making sure that we're using products in a way that is safe for humans and members of the population. A couple other pesticide laws, we've talked a lot about ESA. But then there's many, many other secondary pesticide laws or secondary laws that pesticide use has to comply with as well. So again, another set of checks and balances in place. We've got the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, OSHA, Safe Water Drinking Act, Hazardous Material Transportation Law, Worker Protection Standards, et cetera, et cetera. Any federal law that has the impact of touch pesticides has to be complied with as well. And so lots of checks and balances in place to make sure that pesticide use is being done in a way that is compliant, again, with all the laws, but in a way that makes sure that humans are not interacting with those products in a way that is going to harm them. So that really is a lot of information. It's a lot of regulatory nitty-gritty. But again, you can share that information with your neighbor, and it's all well and good. But they're like, how do I really know that my food is safe from pesticides? I share this with my relative. She's like, well, yeah, that sounds really good, but how do I really know that my baby's food is safe from pesticide residues? And it's a great question. A lot of times we have all these checks and balances in place, but sometimes you don't know till you look. And so the USDA actually runs a program every year, the Pesticide Data Program, and they are continuously checking food for pesticide residues. Again, just another one of those checks and balances. And so they're looking at both domestic and international imports, which is really important. We have very strict pesticide laws in the United States, but not every other country in the world does. And so we know what it takes to keep our consumers safe from pesticide residues. Some countries may not have the same set of standards at their point of entry, but we can check produce, we can check food products as they come into our country to make sure that the consumers in our country consuming these products are not going to be exposed to pesticides exceeding what we know to be safe. And so they're looking at parts per million and parts per billion. They're looking at food products from fresh and frozen produce, all of the commodities, baby food, that's a big one, that's a lot of a topic of conversation. They're looking at grains, nut butters, dairy products, fish and eggs, drinking water. All for pesticide residues that are exceeding what we know to be safe for an individual product. They publish a report every year. So in 2023, it's a little delayed here, but in 2023, they did 9,832 samples, 0.49, so less than 1% of those samples were in violation. And we could dig into the breakdown of what was domestic, what was imported. But what's important here is less than 1% of samples were in violation. Now keep in mind, they are looking for extremely small quantities. Parts per billion, parts per million is really, really small. So just for scale, as you talk to your neighbors, I found this to be a little bit more relatable. If you're a fan of the Harry Potter book series, I'm a nerd and I'm proud of it. I love this book. It has 257,045 words. So if you took 3,890 of these books and you found one word in all of those books, that would be parts per billion. So a very, very small quantity of pesticides that are being analyzed for. So we know that we can detect pesticides at a very low level, and if we are within the tolerances that are set by the EPA, by the FDA, we are very safe. And so this is just something to share with your neighbors as they question your pesticide use and how that impacts their food source. So let's move through the process a little bit more and get to where you can become more involved if you want to. So we got about 10 minutes left. And so let's say the EPA has done their analysis. They have found that the pesticide product that is being submitted for registration is in compliance with all the federal laws. The data and the science back up safe use and effective use for us as applicators, for the consumer as well. And so they want to propose registration or re-registration. Every product is re-registered on a 15-year cycle. And so what happens then is the EPA actually posts that decision, so that proposed registration decision, for public comment. And this is where we can all become involved. The public comment period is an opportunity for anybody to submit comments on that pesticide product. So if you can imagine, it gets pretty wild. But we have an opportunity to share information about our operations and how this product is very important to us as well. Because EPA is required by law, and they actually do this. They take all of those comments and they read them, and they incorporate that information into their final decision. And so there's new data, new information that comes up from these comment periods all the time, and that is actually incorporated into the final decision. So this is a really, really great opportunity for growers to get involved in the process if you're interested. So Georgia has a very, very, very strong history of being involved in this process. And I would imagine that many of you in this room have participated in the comment period process at some point in your careers. So this is just a couple examples from the time period that I've been at UGA, but I know you've all been doing this for a really long time. So growers, other pesticide advocates, you have been very involved in this process, submitting letters, signing on to letters. Georgia Cotton Commission has been extremely instrumental in providing comments on various products. Many extension agents have worked with you all to get letters submitted. Extension specialists do a lot of letters as well. But ultimately, for in-crop dicamba, Georgia has submitted comments twice. So that's everybody on this list. Diuron, atrazine, flumetron, glyphosate, the neonicotinoids, defoliants. We did ESA comments 4 times. Proposed endangered species on the monarch butterfly, NRCS conservation practices, and many, many more. This has been just in the 3-4 years that I've been here, so I know that many of the products that you use, you have been involved in providing public comments to EPA on why those products are important to you over the courses of your career. So thank you for your involvement so far. This has been an extremely successful process. But if you have not become involved in this process yet and you're interested, it's really easy to do. So EPA announces public comments when they make a registration decision. So there's a couple new pesticide products out right now that are open for public comment. And basically, when EPA requests public comments, they're looking for a couple things. They're looking for, how do we use the product? And they'll ask this in their call for comments. How do you use this product on the farm? Or how do you anticipate using this product on the farm? What is the value of this product, and what is your need for it? What are your challenges without it? And then with public comments, we can, especially on the scientific side of things, we can offer up additional data, provide information on safety, and then talk to the perception of pesticide use. But it's really important to understand here that EPA cannot assume anything. You know, you think about what happens if you assume something, you know the rest. EPA cannot assume anything. All of their information has to be backed up by data, by science, by public comment. And so what we share with them through this public comment period helps them understand reality on the farm. Remember, they're building a cost versus benefit analysis. And so they understand the cost, they've got the data about the cost, but they need help from you on the farm understanding the benefit of this pesticide product. So the comments that you submit help build the case of the benefit, build to that analysis, and help support the registration of that pesticide product. So let's say the public comment period is complete. EPA takes all that information, they incorporate it into their final proposal, and that pesticide product is cleared for registration. That final pesticide label that is attached to your jug that ends up on the marketplace, that ends up on your farm, is the reflection of all that previous analysis. So it includes the use across the landscape, all the safety parameters, how the public is going to interact with this, and their food supply and their day-to-day environment. That pesticide label is a reflection of that analysis. And so when we deviate from that pesticide label, we then deviate from the analysis that we know to be safe for us as applicators, but for consumers as well. And so it's important to remember that pesticides are reviewed every 15 years. So in that interim period, they're looking at pesticides to see what has changed. Is there a change in the information that's available on safety and health? Is there some new information on drift and how that is interacting with our local environment, the ecology? Is there evidence of misuse that's moving away from what that pesticide label is supporting? Are there water issues, et cetera? And so the way that we use pesticide products in that interim, in that 15 years, is very much helping build that case for that 15-year reevaluation. And that's another area that we all, as pesticide applicators, play a huge role. You as growers, us as scientists, we're using pesticide products, and when we use them in a way that is supportive of how they are labeled, We are supporting that regulatory analysis, and we are supporting the case to have that product renewed in 15 years. So just something to keep in mind. It gets very frustrating. It gets very, very frustrating. But the way those products is labeled is reflective of how to minimize interactions with that product in the environment and human health. But then this is another big one. This one's very important to me. Using pesticide products in a way that is safe. When that product is labeled, when there are PPE, re-entry interval mixing and loading instructions, that is reflective of what it takes to keep us safe from those residues that may cause us harm if we deviate from the instructions that are included on the label. So every label has those PPE instructions. We talked extensively about this at UPW, but I just wanted to throw this up here as a reminder, especially as I get to the end today. Those pesticide residues are sneaky, and when we don't wear PPE, unfortunately, those can enter other areas of our lives, including our home, exposing our family members, our neighbors, our friends to pesticide residues that they're not equipped to handle, and we're deviating away from the label when we do that, and that deviates away from what we know to be safe. So just keep that in mind. But there are numerous groups always advocating for your pesticide stewardship and pesticide availability into the future. Of course, huge thanks to the Georgia Cotton Commission. They're really instrumental in helping lead that charge. UG Extension, CropLife America, Weed Science Society of America, and the other scientific societies, Farm Bureau, lots and lots of groups advocating for pesticide use on your behalf. But ultimately, I think that it's the most important to consider that growers, pesticide applicators are really instrumental in helping lead this charge. So I really encourage you to get involved and join the team, like Taylor said, when it comes to pesticide stewardship. Smart applications, safe applications, but being willing to talk to your friends and neighbors about pesticide use, about how we know pesticides are safe, will really go a long way in helping us ensure that we have pesticides available to us for the long term. So that's all I got today. I think I stayed on time. So maybe a minute or two for questions if anybody has any while the next speaker comes up. Thank you for your time today.
Good deal. All right, so this is one of my favorite weeks of the year. All right, I love coming over here. I actually came over on Monday to be a part of the Middle Executive delegation from Bangladesh, and so get to spend a few days over here in East Georgia, see the crop, catch up with folks, run over to Midville and see what it looks like on the station. I love coming over here for about 3 days, but and actually I have changed my presentation since I came over on Monday. Okay, so it's helped me out a lot, just getting eyes on the crop, seeing what's going on, and different stuff like that. But before I get into it about the crop and acreage and stuff like that, I do want to point out a lot of ways to get information, okay? A lot of our county agents are in here. They distribute all the things that we do. We do a newsletter every month, the first part of the month, and talk about some considerations that we believe growers should be thinking about going into that next month, right? And things that we need to be thinking about doing. Another thing that we do a little more frequently is the podcast, record it there on the Tifton campus. Of course, appreciate all the support there from the Cotton Commission, Cotton Incorporated, the Tifton campus in terms of the equipment and the infrastructure to be able to do something like that. I hope you guys find it useful. But we do that every 2 weeks throughout the growing season. If you subscribe, it'll just show up on your phone. I have it set to automatically download to mine whenever a new episode comes out. So something that is a lot of fun, I really think helps keep a pulse on the crop. Another thing that I mentioned this past winter, and this is actually a Cotton Incorporated sponsored effort, is the Cotton Specialist Corner podcast. And this is one that's got a little bit more of a belt-wide type focus. We talk a little bit more about some of the larger issues that go on across the belt. And we've done a few of these this year that I have had a lot of fun with. One of them was early on, we talked about some fertility issues and stuff like that across the belt. And man, I just love talking to some of these folks and how smart they are. I learned something. I asked questions about how it would apply here. Another one that we did just a few weeks ago was with a wildlife biologist out of Clemson. Many of y'all know Corey Heaton, okay? Me and him got on the podcast and talked for an hour and 20 minutes about deer, okay? It was a lot of fun. Like, whenever you have good folks on there, it is a lot of fun to do that one, but I hope that you guys find that one useful as well. Taylor mentioned a lot of the field days that are coming up. I know there's a couple people in here I will probably see tomorrow in Attapulgis as well, but I did want to highlight, since we're in East Georgia, the Midville Field Day is on August 12th. If you want to go ahead and register, you can pull your phone out and take a picture of that and get registered if you're not already. It would really help out these guys if you would register, so we know how many are coming for lunch. Thank you, Rocky, for registering for the field day, okay? So, one thing that people constantly ask me about whenever we're talking on the phone or whatever is about the acreage trends for this year, okay? And so I pulled this from the production guide, made a couple changes, but this is planted acres and then yield averages over the last nearly 30 years, okay? So, and this is USDA data, right? So take it for what it is, okay? But looking over the last few years, we did go down to the lowest planted acres in the last 30 years. The lowest planted acres since 1993, if memory serves correct, a year ago. Okay, and it did not take a rocket scientist. I really had this fear after Hurricane Helene. Okay, it did not take a rocket scientist to see what was coming. Okay, the cotton price was low. We knew that 2025 was going to be a year of survival. Okay, and so people planted a lot more peanuts. There was a lot more corn last year, but fortunately, it does look like we're going to be over 1 million acres again in 2026. That is a good thing for the state of Georgia. It's a good thing for Georgia agriculture. And you know, we took a few acres from peanuts with the price run that happened on the front end of the planting window, and it probably affected East Georgia a little bit more than it did parts of Southwest Georgia. Like in Terrell County, they probably had a good bit of corn already planted, right, Seth? So, you know, those are some of the things that happened this year. I do want to point out that last year was the second highest yield on record. The last time we broke a record, Dr. Roberts, was 2012. Okay, we're overdue for it, right? We need to break us another record. It might happen this year. So we're, you know, keeping an eye on this kind of stuff. But something that I think is interesting, and again, in 2026, it looks like we're going to be above that 1 million acre mark, okay? So looking at crop progress, you know, it's been a wild ride. I would say I'm going to tell a story of 2 seasons or maybe even 3, depending on where you are in the state. But, you know, looking at kind of how it all started out, the planting progress did follow some of the historical trends. I do know that planting was difficult in pockets of the state, just with how wet it got in May and June. But we were able to get it done, and really, my hat is off to the growers in this room. You guys are a master at logistics and being able to move around and know where you can do things and where you can't. And so we did get the crop planted, started squaring good, drug a little bit there in May, but really it showed up in June, and I'll talk about that here in a little bit. But overall, it looks like things are kind of getting back to where they need to be, and we're kind of on track right there, okay? But really, it started this past fall, right, where we started with such a severe drought. And you know, me and Dr. Roberts, we spent a lot of time driving around the state in January, February, early part of March. And this past spring, we would drive by somewhere, and he'd point out the window, he'd say, man, there's supposed to be water in the woods right here. There's supposed to be water in this ditch right here. There ain't no water. And once these trees leaf out, we're gonna have a problem, okay? And he was right. I mean, in the first part of April, that's the drought monitor, okay? And the majority of the state was in a severe, severe drought. And it was probably one of the worst in history. We actually, on April 7th, I believe it was, in Tifton, We may have got 3/4 of an inch a few days earlier, and that was the last rain that I thought we were going to get. And so we planted cotton that day, okay? And so we were able to kind of get started in our neck of the woods because we got one of those pop-up showers. But what is wild is this is the drought monitor as of last Thursday, okay? Now, I think if we were to check tomorrow, I don't know how often it comes out, if it comes out once a week, I think if we were to check tomorrow, there would be a little bit more encroachment of that orange type category into the east part of this state. And just being over here, I've seen some of the issues that you guys are facing, but it is wild how we have gone from such a severe drought statewide to really not quite as bad as we thought it would be going into the season. But you know, looking back at kind of the planting season and looking at rainfall data across southeast Georgia, it's pretty wild to me that looking back to last year, we had issues getting planted as well. It was extremely wet and we really had to do some moving around. But for the most part, in most of these areas that we have weather stations with the UGA weather monitoring network, we were above or close to rainfall in 2026. We rained a little bit more in 2026 than we did in 2025 from May 1st to July 1st, which is pretty wild to me. But even if you look at the number of rainy days in places where we did not catch as much rain in 26 as we did in 25, we had more rainy days. And it's not necessarily the amount of rain, but it's, you know, you get a 1/4 inch here or there and it'll keep you out another day, right? Or a 1/2 inch, you know, whatever it may be. So certainly presents a lot of issues. Parts of southeast Georgia did catch more rain in 26 than in 25 up to that July 1st mark. But we did see some more of those rainy days. So what, right? What does it mean? And really for somebody like me that's impatient, it means that we're going to try to push the limits, okay? And if you were to come to Tifton and kind of look at some of our cotton, you would see where I tried to push the limits, okay? Whenever it was so wet, I was still going to get in the field and try to spray a little bit of cotton. This was last week. You can kind of see where I slid off a little bit, but hey, we got that fixed. We got back in a row. And then down here in this picture, Dr. Roberts was actually planting cotton the same day. I pulled a fertilizer spreader in. I told him he was crazy. He told me it was wet. I told him he was crazy. I pulled a fertilizer buggy in the field and sunk off in a row pretty quick. Okay, so I parked it for a few more days, and then we got it done a few days later. But it did present some issues with as wet as we were early in the season. Okay, so we had 15 to 20 inches of rain statewide from May 1st through June, but really since then it has dried off pretty significantly. Okay, and so those early season issues, we still see some of those this time of year, okay? And even some of the things that we talked about yesterday while we were over at the experiment station, we're still seeing some impacts of some of that early rain. Of course, there were delays getting in the field, doing early season weed control and fertility, right? We talked a good bit about goosegrass yesterday, and that weed has got its own issues, but I do think that the amount of rain we had early on wasn't helping us. That's breaking down herbicides and things like that, allowing a little bit more breakthrough. Our early side dress applications were washed out, and this picture on the right is a good example of that. That's a dryland field in Tifton, and we had side dressed 100 units of nitrogen, 25 units of sulfur in this field, and then we got 5 inches of rain in that field from the application to when the picture was taken, which was about 2 weeks, and so we had to retreat that with 50 units of nitrogen and another 50 units of sulfur, try to bring it out of what we were seeing there. I've gotten a lot of phone calls like that. I've seen some stuff. Me and Bill did a troubleshoot the other day, and it looked like textbook sulfur to me, but that one's a little more complicated, right? There's some of these issues that are cropping up because of what we've seen in the early season. Now, I did bring up the crop progress in 2026, and the thing that caught my attention was how we kind of drug on setting bowls right there, really once our early planted crops started blooming. And it was kind of interesting. I started looking and digging into some of the weather data associated with some of that. And, the crop is a little behind where we planted early, okay? So where we planted the first part of May, that's the stuff that drug on a little bit in terms of starting to bloom. It's about 50 to 100 growing degree days behind where it normally is over the last 5 years or so, okay? But once we get into this May 15th planted cotton and later, which I would say is probably most of our state, that stuff is right on time. Okay, with respect to temperature, it is right on time in terms of growing degree days. So in East Georgia, I do think that the 2026 crop is on time where we have water, okay, and where we've been timely with irrigation, been able to keep up with that, and maybe have caught a little bit of rain, okay. In terms of management, there's a couple things I think we need to talk about. Just moving down the road as we get into August, we plant about 20% of our crop in the month of June, okay, as a state normally, right? And so there's a good bit of cotton that is just now starting to get treated with plant growth regulator, okay? The one thing that I really want to point out is that there is a lot of 2333 out there, okay? A lot of people have planted that variety for good reason. It's a good variety, grades good, yields well, all that good stuff. But I think that we're treating it like some of these more aggressive varieties. A lot of people got used to planting things like 1646, 2038, 2127, 5091, some of the Dynagrow varieties that are very aggressive, and treating cotton that way for a long time. But if you look, these are different categories of aggressiveness that I have these varieties put into. And you see some of the ones that I just mentioned, 2038, 2127, Stoneville 5091 in this group where, hey, they're a little bit more aggressive. They're not as aggressive as like the Dynagrow 3799s of the world, or Next Gen 5430, things like that. But a lot of people planted 2333 and have managed it fairly aggressively. That variety is actually the next category from the bottom, okay? Meaning that it's not the most aggressive variety in the world. It's pretty responsive to PGRs, and those of you that have grown it and have sprayed a little bit of Pix on it, learn that fairly quickly, okay? So that's one thing that I think we got to keep in mind, is knowing the variety that you plant in your fields, knowing the history of the field, and knowing how to treat that. I try to get my hands on as many cotton varieties as I can every year so that I can add them to this list. The agents have this. If you have questions about a given variety, I know that I only pointed out one, but this list is available to you guys, okay? So I want you guys to have that. I want you to use it how you see fit on your place, okay? Now, in terms of PGRs, I showed this slide last year. This is some of Dr. John Snyder's data. And utilizing PGRs aggressively can shorten your season. So I think it was yesterday, we were driving around and passed a field of 4-leaf cotton, okay? We need to treat that pretty aggressively with Pix, okay? Because we're gonna run out of time on the back end. But being a little more aggressive will shorten your season by, 3, 4, 5 days, something like that. And that Dr. Snyder's aggressive approach is a little different than everybody else's aggressive approach. It's different than what I would call aggressive, but what they did was put on a pre-bloom application at the 8 to 10 leaf stage, and that reduced the season by about 5 days in this particular environment, okay? So that's one thing we need to keep in mind whenever we're going out and treating some of this cotton that's actively growing, okay? And 5 days can mean a lot in October. That's the big thing that we need to be thinking about, all right? I talked a little bit about fertility and some of the issues that we've seen over the last couple of years, or over the last couple of months rather. And looking at this, we got to be realistic about some of this yield goal stuff, okay? If we've got dry land cotton in this part of the state that has not had fertilizer on it, we need to think pretty serious about the rate of nitrogen that we're going to put out there, okay? Because again, you start sinking those input costs, you lose net returns, all that good stuff. So we've got to be realistic about what we're going to make, and more important than rate is timing. And I think that goes with anything. Being timely on the farm can alleviate a lot of issues. And you look at this nitrogen use curve by the cotton plant, it really starts to ramp up about the time the crop starts blooming. And what I've seen just from my experience on the experiment station is if we wait to first bloom, a lot of times that crop is already turning yellow before it gets the fertilizer, and it may take a week for that to turn around. So really we need to be eyeing that pinhead square type stage for some of these side dress applications of nitrogen fertilizer. Do not forget about sulfur whenever you're doing stuff like that. I think, in my opinion, I don't have anything to prove it, I think that sulfur is underestimated in cotton, okay? I think we need to take a long, hard look at some of that. We've got a new extension soil fertility specialist. His name's Dr. Doug Amaral. I hope that he's going to start looking at some of that stuff. And then, of course, get a lot of calls about potash at side dress. The official recommendation is, hey, it don't help you that much, but if it helps you sleep at night, get after it. I put out potash with my side dress too, okay? So certainly some stuff that we need to consider, all right? Now, these are the slides that I've added since yesterday, okay? Being in this part of the state and being in East Georgia, I have seen how dry it is, okay? It is extremely, extremely dry in this part of the state, okay? And, you know, I went back and looked last night, and there are spots in southeast Georgia that have only gotten a ½ inch over the last 20 some odd days, but I know in conversation with growers, they have fields that have gotten nothing for the last 40 days, okay? So it is extremely, extremely dry in this part of the state, okay? And the picture I took on the left is a field of dryland cotton. It does not look bad. This was yesterday afternoon, okay? This is not a bad field of dryland cotton, but you can tell it needs a drink of water, okay? Now, the one thing that I went out there and did, I counted a few nodes out there and stuff like that. This crop is 3 node above white flower, Dr. Snyder. That means that it's at cutout, okay? And the definition of cutout is that it means that that crop is no longer going to produce vegetative growth that will significantly contribute to yield, okay? So by and large, this crop right here is going to make what it makes. Now, if we catch a rain and it fills out, I think it's got good potential for the situation that we're in right now. 750 pounds, 1,000 pounds potentially, if it can hold on to what it's got. We get the rain, we fill that out a little bit. But there is cotton in this part of the state that I have put my eyes on that does not look like this, okay? It may be a foot tall, 18 inches tall, and it's blooming out the top. Okay, so some of this is going to take some pretty serious conversations. We're going to have to take a long, hard look at this, and depending on when we get some rain, it's going to change up what we do, okay? But going into August, how do we deal with something like this, okay? There's still a lot of cotton out there that has not started blooming yet, okay? If the cotton has not started blooming yet, we can catch a rain and we can start stacking fruit on that, okay? We still got good potential on some of that, okay? Now, if the cotton is at first bloom and simultaneously is cut out, that's where we need to start having some of these tougher conversations. If we start catching rain, it can start stacking nodes, and we can ride 3, 4, 5 node above white flower for a few weeks and make a crop. But we just need to get that rain as soon as possible, and the crop has got to start growing again. And in some cases, it's going to throw some fruit off before it starts growing, okay? That's part of the deal, all right? That's how cotton works. Now, I mentioned the crop on the left. I still think that's a really good scenario. If we can hold what it's got and fill out what's there, I think we'll still make a good dryland crop in that type of situation. But the biggest thing that I want people to know is that we need to reduce the stress on that crop, and we do not need to slow it down. Since I've been here the last 3 days, I've had some growers asking about should we PIX this dryland cotton and all that good stuff. PIX does not solve all of our problems, okay? And I wish that it did, but that's not how it works. PIX slows the cotton plant down, okay? And if we slow something like that down, that means it's done, okay? It's not going to grow anymore. So on some dryland cotton that doesn't look the best, really needs a drink of water, I'd hold off on the PIX until it started growing again, okay? And then we'll manage it accordingly going throughout the rest of the season. But we have still got a long, long way to go on this crop. we're just entering the first part of August this week, okay? So we have still got good potential. We still got a long way to go with respect to the crop. One thing, I don't think we've been in a situation since I started my position where I would think about chasing the top of a crop, okay, putting a top on. And those are some conversations that we will likely be having as we enter the fall, and what is feasible and what we need to think about doing. But the biggest part of that is knowing when the last effective bloom date is, okay? And really, in this part of the state, I'd feel pretty confident with September 15th. If you can make a bloom on September 15th, it is likely that you can get a boll out of that and harvest a little bit of cotton, okay? So those are some of the things we need to be looking at, thinking about managing for as we move down the road, okay? One more thing I want to touch on for just a second is the deer issue, right? Everybody knows we've been working really, really hard on this over the last few years. I mentioned we planted some cotton on April the 7th. The picture on the left, I got a permit this year and started handling that problem in that field, and that is the cotton that was planted April 7th, and the picture was taken June 15th, okay? That should be blooming really, really good, all right? And it's not, because they were wearing me out, okay? So I went out and I started doing what I had to do. Of course, she was one of my victims. This is another picture that I took Marshall took it, Dalton. Marshall took that picture in Mitchell County. Similar thing where we had seen on one side of a field road, they had just annihilated the cotton. Had a perfect stand, and now there's nothing there. I saw a drone picture of it yesterday. But certainly still an issue that we are working on and learning how to deal with, okay? One thing, I had a graduate student over the last 2 years that really was working on having some data that we could talk about with people whenever we have these type conversations. And Lance graduated, he's back on the farm now, but he took some really good data, took some really cool pictures, and this is one of my favorites that he put in his presentations, where he would show that inside the cage where the cotton was protected for the whole year, dry land cotton, 670 pounds to the acre, but outside, between the cages, it made 15 pounds, okay? So we know how severe this issue can be. I am still trying to relay that to people, okay? Because I think people know it's a problem, but they don't know how bad of a problem it is, okay? So we're still working on some of that, but I do think that we have made a little bit of headway. There's been a little bit of impact, and I've talked a lot about the investment of the state legislature in the Hunters for the Hungry program. I think that is a win. Okay, now last year, they actually implemented something during deer season that I thought was very interesting. There was an antlerless only weekend during bow season that you could go hunt with a firearm, okay? The way that they wanted it to work was that you go and you shoot your does early in the season, you donate those to a Hunters for the Hungry location. That goes to feed families in need, right? And it helps incentivize doe harvest a little bit, basically. All right, so I've pulled the last 2 deer seasons worth of harvest data, okay? And the big difference is right there, okay? You look in the last 2 years, there is a spike in doe harvest in that one weekend of October, okay? That is awesome, okay? That is really, really good stuff. And there were a lot of questions about if it was going to be an additive effect or if it was just going to be the people that harvest their does at the end of deer season if they just did it early. But actually it did reflect that it was an additive effect. They harvested 8,000 more does last year than we did the year previous. So I think that is a really, really good thing, a good story to tell. And really, if you look over the last couple of years, the highest that goes is 5,000. The highest this goes is 10,000. There weren't that many does harvested on any given weekend throughout hunting season over the last 2 years, okay? So really, really good stuff that I think is going on. And it's going to take a long time to see the impacts of this, but we're getting started, and I think it's going to help us out. And you know, this is an article that I pulled last year. They had a lot of questions about the success of the program. They discussed it in a few different articles in Georgia Outdoor magazine. And, you know, really at the end of the day, they did state that it helped us out in terms of doe harvest. Now, I did want to reinforce that they're doing it again this year, okay? For anybody who's a deer hunter or anybody who rents land to deer hunters or anything like that, the weekend in 2026 is October 3rd and 4th, all right? It's a Saturday and Sunday, all right, Savannah. On Monday, bow season comes back in. We do not need to go back out there after that and just give it to them, you know, doing whatever we do, all right? It goes back to bow season, then gun season will come back in a couple weeks later, all right? But that is a really good opportunity for us to go do some stuff. I know some people that I hunt with, they never shoot does. And on that one weekend, they went out to their place and they shot their 10 pretty quick, okay? So it is having impacts on people in the way that they manage the herd, all right? Last thing I'm going to touch on, I generally try not to get involved in some of the stuff that Dr. Singleton was talking about unless I have to, okay? And I have been roped into something, and I'm going to ask for you guys' help, okay? So if you're a grower in this room, I need you to pull your phone out of your pocket. I'm going to throw a QR code up here, and I need you to fill out a little survey for me, okay? But this was a headline that came out in February, and if you were paying attention to anything that was going on this past winter, spring and winter time, there was a lot of news coming out about the use of pre-harvest desiccants in crops, okay? The majority of that surrounded controversy around oats and glyphosate in cereal and whatever. And oddly enough, there is not a glyphosate level for desiccation in oats in the United States. So that's coming from somewhere else, okay? But at the end of the day, one thing that is interesting to me is that the very last bullet is talking about money for funding and stuff like that. The very last bullet talks about finding alternatives to pre-harvest desiccation use of pesticides, okay? Now, a lot of people may glance over that and say, hey, no big deal, you know, whatever. All right, in cotton, that is a big deal, all right? So I was reached out to by Dr. Culpepper and Bill Chisholm with the Weed Science Society of America to put something together for them to compile the use of pesticides and educate the EPA on the use of pesticides in pre-harvest desiccation in cotton. And they're putting it together for every crop. But to help me put some of that together, I am going to ask the growers in this room to fill this out. It's 10 questions. I put it together fairly quick. It's not going to take a really long time, but I want to know how valuable defoliants are to you, okay? And let me tell you something, they should be very valuable to you, all right? Everybody in this room sprays them. I know a few people that don't, and that's okay, but this affects not only growers, it affects ginners, it affects mill executives, okay? So this is something that could affect the entire supply chain, and we need to make sure that these guys understand that we cannot grow a perennial plant as an annual crop without terminating it with something, okay? Even having conversations with my colleagues in Texas, every now and then they'll let the frost get it. I know that that happens around here as well, but even in the organic market, in the organic cotton market in Texas, they do not utilize an organic alternative to a defoliant, even though I'm gonna start looking at stuff like that, but they just let the frost get it, let a freeze get it. And if we start doing that on a wide scale, it delays harvest for us, it delays when we can start harvest based on our first frost date and all that good stuff. So if you guys wouldn't mind filling this out, it would really help me out a bunch. And you know, keep in mind, these defoliants are becoming more and more important because the technology in these cotton varieties is changing. The next big technology in cotton for herbicides is going to be PPO resistance. That's group 14 herbicides, all right? So you look at herbicides like Reviton or AIM or ET, here in the next few years, those are going to be irrelevant as defoliants, okay? So we've got to hang on to products like Genstar and Folex or DEF, Drop or Thidiazuron, Free Fall, Clean Pick, whatever you want to call it, and then of course Ethifon, and those are going to be really what we hang our hat on for the foreseeable future unless one of these chemical companies decides to come out with a new defoliant, which in my opinion is unlikely. So greatly appreciate you guys. I hope that was helpful. I appreciate the help on that survey as well. Of course, want to thank the Commission for everything they do, and Cotton Incorporated as well, and Georgia Farm Bureau, all of our extension agents that are here. Really appreciate you guys making a trip. Any questions for me real quick before we move on with the program? Cool. Well, hey, I'll be around for the rest of the meeting. Yes, sir.
If your top dress has been sitting out there for the last month and you haven't got a whole lot of rain, what are you looking at if we do catch a good rain this weekend in East Georgia?
Yeah.
Are you looking at like trying to do some foliar applications, or what would your recommendation be?
So what was your top dress?
It was like 100 units of like urea.
Urea. Did you put an inhibitor on it or not?
Yes.
How long ago did you do it?
I mean, this was, like I said, about a month ago.
Month ago? Yeah, so these are some of the tough conversations we're going to have. Is it blooming?
Yes.
All right. Blooming out the top. Okay. I'd wait and see what the rain does before I did anything. Okay. And you want to see it start growing again before you start making trips across the field with some foliar, anything like that. And really, once you start looking at some of these foliar applications, you're not talking much. If it were to take up 100% of what you put out there, you're talking, if it were, a lot of times we recommend foliar potash, which would be a 10-0-46 or whatever. If it were to uptake 100% of that, it would get 5 pounds of potash. The way that cotton utilizes potash, it'll run through that in a day. Okay, so these foliar applications may make you feel a little bit better, but they're not doing much, and so it's, it's good as a Band-Aid, especially towards the end of the season, just to buy a little time. But in terms of pushing it out, I don't know that it's going to do it.
Do you think the urea is still there?
I don't. I don't, because it's been really humid out there. I mean, you've probably lost a good bit of it. And so if you were going to do anything, I would go over it with another 30 units ahead of this rain, or after it's over, and kind of see what happens after that. Ideally, you want that to throw a little bit of fruit and start back over. So that's kind of the situation that I'd be looking at.